So am I live? So am I live? Okay, let's try this.
All that data to using a port on the outside of your computer. Now, when it comes to mass storage devices, there are generally three sizes of devices that you're going to come across. This includes 2.5-inch, 3.5-inch, and a 5.25-inch drive. Now, the 2.5-inch drive and the 3.5-inch drive are normally going to be reserved for internal hard disk drives as well as solid state devices, whereas the 5.25-inch drive bay is going to be used for things like optical drives, tape backup drives, and floppy disk drives. Depending on your use case, you'll have a certain number of these different bays available for use.
Gonna be the whole disk, right?
It sounds like you're checking if something covers the entire disk. Can you tell me more about what you're referring to? Like,
I'm talking about for the hard drives. Do hard drives the when we're referring to the disk itself that the actuator is reading from, is that or that the read write head is reading from? Is the entire disk called a platter, or do we just call it a disk?
The disk inside a hard drive is called a platter. It's a circular piece that stores data magnetically.
Okay, and there can be multiple platters.
Yes, a
And does
hard
that mean that they're all
Yes, multiple platters increase storage capacity by giving the read-write heads.
okay?
Typically, there's one actuator arm assembly that moves multiple read-write heads, one head for each platter surface. So a multi-platter drive will have several heads, but they all move together on the same actuator. Yes, that's right. Each platter surface typically has its own read-write head, and all those heads are mounted on.
Wait, this is saying that four platters equals heads?
Correct. Each platter has two surfaces, and each surface has its own read-write head. So four platters means eight heads.
Oh, so read write head is the top and the bottom of the.
Exactly. Each platter has a read-write head on the top surface and another on the bottom, so both sides can store and access data simultaneously.
Sorry. So the actuator thing that moves read write head is the thing that goes on top of the below it, like
That's right. The actuator moves the.
In your system across these various three sizes. If you don't have enough of the smaller bays, you could always 512 bytes, but each of the tracks is going to be a different size based on the drive geometry that was created by the drive's manufacturer when they low-level formatted that drive during the manufacturing process.
what is the low level for?
Low-level formatting is the process of establishing the physical layout of a hard drive, defining track.
Process. Say that again? Maybe.
Sure, low-level formatting is the process of laying down the physical structure of the drive.
Are drives kind of programmed too, or are they just
They're both. Hard drives have physical components like platters and heads, plus
and when we're talking about low level formatting, we're just talking about the part.
yes.
So as you can see, we're going to have to spin this platter around to be able to move the actuator and the read-write head to the right location to read the data or write the data to the.
Shrink all that down so that it fits in the palm of your speed spinning disks, with a recording head flying over each surface. Each disk is coated with a film of microscopic, magnetized metal grains. And your data doesn't live there in a form you can recognize. Instead, it is recorded as a magnetic pattern formed by groups of those tiny grains. In each group, also known as a bit, all of the grains have their magnetizations aligned.
When he says a bit is hard drives.
In magnetic hard drives, a single bit of data isn't stored in just one tiny spot. Instead, it's represented by a cluster of magnetic grains, often around a dozen or more.
What is it?
A grain is a tiny magnetic region on the platter. Multiple grains together represent a single bit. Modern drives use about 18 grains per bit to ensure data stability and accuracy.
It a grain is a section within a section of magnetic uh area. So if you have like a magnetic area, split that whole entire magnetic section, split that into smaller section, and so of the smaller section that so we have the area, and then we have section, and we have the section of the section. Refer to that section of it. Answer that.
You can think of that smallest section as a grain.
Yes, but I'm trying to understand grain. I need a different term. Subsection. We'll do that. So you have an area, and then we have the area split into sections. We have the sections, subsections, and then all that we're talking about when we say grain is subsection magnetic.
Yes, you
In one of two possible states, which correspond to zeros and ones.
How many are like sorry, in an entire hard drive?
The exact number depends on the drive's capacity and technology, but it's enormous. Each bit typically uses around 18 to a few hundred grains. Multiply that by the total number of bits in the drive, billions to trillions, and you get trillions upon trillions of grains in a modern hard drive.
Like trillions times
The total number of magnetic grains in a hard drive is enormous, around 18 grains per bit of data. For a drive that holds billions of bits, that adds up to trillions of grains.
it'd be 18 times. If let's say there's a billion bits, that'd be 18 times a bit.
Exactly.
Data is written onto the disk by converting strings of bits into electrical current.
The platter. This is what we refer to as seeking or retrieving the data. Because of this, the faster you can spin the hard disk, the faster you're actually able to access the data that's being stored on it. So, when you're trying to buy a hard disk drive, you need to consider its speed as measured in RPMs or revolutions per minute, because the higher speed is going to give you better drive performance.
Okay, so RPM is about this patience, like because the actuator, the right head isn't. What do we? Oh wait, yeah. Oh, is the disc? Right head moves. Oh, like
Correct. The disk
is
platter.
disc and platter interchangeable?
Yes, disk.
Okay, so the disc itself is spinning, and the
Exactly.
and when we say RPM, we're talking.
Right.
Okay, so then we can say RPM is gonna be an drive. Uh, RPM. Uh, RPM, or I can just disk, because the hard drive could consist of.
Yes.
When you look at a hard disk drive, you're going to see generally four basic types of speeds that are out there. This includes 5400 RPMs, 7200 RPMs, 10,000 RPMs, and 15,000 RPMs. The first type of hard drive we have is what's called a 5400 RPM model. And this is going to be the slowest model of hard drive that's out there, and this is what you're going to find in a budget or low-end workstation or PC these days. The second one we have is what's known as a 7200 RPM drive, and this provides us with faster performance while not having an exceptionally high cost. This is really a good balance, and it's used in most modern computers when you're purchasing one with a hard disk drive these days. The third one we have have is what's known as 10,000 RPMs, and this is where we really start getting into high-performance drives. Generally, these are going to cost you more money than a 7,200 RPM drive will, but they will give you increased performance, and they're used in a lot of gaming PCs, high-performance PCs, and servers. Finally, we have 15,000 RPM drives. Now, 15,000 RPM drives are going to be one of the highest RPMs you're going to find used inside of a hard disk drive. Because of this, it does have a much higher cost than the others, but it will give you the highest levels of performance. In general, you're not going to see a lot of 15,000 RPM hard drives being used these days, and the main reason for this is that by the time you start getting to that level of hard drive, you simply could have bought a solid-state device, which eliminates a lot of those seek time issues we have, because SSDs or solid-state devices don't have moving parts like a traditional hard drive does. You may be wondering, why do people like to use hard disk drives instead of using a solid-state device? Well, mainly it comes down to cost and not performance. For performance, solid-state devices are going to be so much faster than a traditional hard drive, but a hard drive is a lot cheaper for us to produce. This means you can get a much larger capacity hard disk drive for the same cost as a very low capacity solid-state device. For example, I was recently building a new computer and I installed a solid-state device into that new computer. This solid-state device was 2 terabytes in size and it cost me around $150.
When we're talking about reading data, we're difference between the read write head reading data versus like that whole process of data reading kind of is that just that as when we're comparing like STD.
Yes, we generally refer to that entire process as reading data.
$50. If I had instead used a 7,200 RPM drive, though, I could have gotten 8 or 12 terabytes for the same $150 cost. This would have given me 4 to 6 times more storage, but slower performance. For this reason, there really is still a place for hard drives, though. In fact, in many systems, people build both a hard disk drive and a solid-state device into the system. And this is actually what I ended up doing with my new computer. I actually put a solid-state device in, which is much faster to store my primary operating system and application files. But
Pros and
it was only 2 terabytes in size.
pros and cons. Uh,
So I then installed a secondary device, which is a hard disk drive that was a very large capacity drive of 10 terabytes. And this has allowed me
The exact number depends on the drive's capacity and technology, but it's enormous. Each bit typically uses around 18 to a few hundred grains. Multiply that by the total number of bits in the drive, billions to trillions, and you get trillions upon trillions of grains in a modern hard drive.
like trillions times
The total number of magnetic grains in a hard drive is enormous, around 18 grains per bit of data. For a drive that holds billions of bits, that adds up to trillions of grains.
it'd be 18 times if let's say there's a billion bits, that'd be 18 times a
Exactly.
Data is written onto the disk by
subsection. We have an area, then we have the area split section. Hello, section, hello. Subsection. And then all that we're talking about when we grain. Okay.
Me to store all of my excess files like videos that I create for this course and large virtual machine files and things like that, because all of these files have
Yeah. Is it getting changed? Is it like so I don't like kill my area or something? Hello, hello? 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 Hello, hello? Hello, hello? 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 I think that's good. Hello? 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 I think that's good. Hello?
have huge file sizes, and it would take up a lot of disk space and be very expensive to store on a device. Now, if I instead tried to use a solid state device for everything, it would have become very expensive. And it cost me around for this is that by the time you start getting to that level of hard drive, you simply could have bought a solid state device, which eliminates a lot of those seek time issues we have because SSDs or solid state devices don't have moving parts like a traditional hard drive does. You may be wondering, why do people like to use hard disk drives instead of using a solid state device? Well, mainly it comes down to cost and not performance. For performance, solid state devices are going to be so much faster than a traditional hard drive, but a hard drive is a lot cheaper for us to produce. This means that you can get a much larger capacity hard disk drive for the same cost as a very low capacity solid state device.
Okay, so hard drives store more and better storage, but better storage, slower speed, slower reading. Maybe we could say storage. We could put like green and reading our speed. We can put as red.
For example, I was recently building a new computer and I installed a solid state device into that new computer. This solid state device was 2 terabytes in size and it cost me around $150. If I had instead used a 7200 RPM drive, though, I could have gotten 8 or 12 terabytes for the same $150 cost. This would have given me 4 to 6 times more storage, but slower performance. For this reason, there really is still a place for hard drives, though. In fact, in many systems, people build both a hard disk drive and a solid state device into the system. And this is actually what I ended up doing with my new computer. I actually put a solid state device in, which is much faster to store my primary operating system and application files, but it was only 2 terabytes in size. So I then installed a secondary device, which is a hard disk drive, that was a very large capacity drive of 10 terabytes. And this has allowed me to store all of my excess files like videos that I create for this course and large virtual machine files and things like that, because all these files have huge file sizes and would take up a lot of disk space and be very expensive to store on a solid state device. Now, if I instead tried to use a solid state device for everything, it would become very expensive. And so a hybrid solution of using a solid state device and a hard disk drive like this works as a good compromise. Now, when you're looking at a hard disk drive, another Another area you need to consider is its buffer size. Now, the buffer size is an internal buffer or cache on that hard disk drive that allows the drive to cache a lot of the data to increase its overall performance as it's seeking and reading new data.
There we go. Storage good, speed no bueno.
The typical buffer size you're going to see on a hard disk drive will be anywhere from 8 megabytes to 256 megabytes, depending on the drive you're buying. When it comes to buffer size, the larger the buffer, the better the performance. So you want to pick a hard drive that has a large buffer size when you're picking out one. State device and a hard disk drive like this works as a good compromise. Now, when you're looking at a hard disk drive, another area you need to consider is its buffer size. Now, the buffer size is an internal buffer or cache on that hard disk drive that allows the drive to cache a lot of the data to increase its overall performance as it's seeking and reading new data. The typical buffer size you're going to see on a hard disk drive will be anywhere from 8 megabytes to 256 megabytes, depending on the drive you're buying. When it comes to buffer size, the larger the
I don't know if I need to know that, but I'm just gonna do it anyways. 8 to 2.
buffer, the better the performance. So you want to pick a hard drive that has a large buffer size when you're picking out one when performance is your main concern. Now, when it comes to installing your hard disk drive, you're going to have to connect it to the motherboard using a cable. And the type of cable you're going to use is going to depend on the form factor as well as the hard drive that you selected. In most modern systems, you're
Hard drives use mostly SATA.
going to be using a SATA cable to connect your hard disk drive to your motherboard, and you'll either use SATA version 1, version 2, or version 3. Now, when using a SATA connector,
Oh, I forgot SATA has 3 versions. Mm,
you're actually going to use two different cables.
15 pin SATA power cable, 7-pin SATA data cable.
You're actually going to use two different cables.
15 pin SATA power cable, 7-pin SATA data cable. Maybe we could say storage, could put like ring and reading. So I need to turn this into 3. I could put 3 in here, but both SATA and eSATA both have 3 versions, right?
Yes, SATA has three main revisions: 1.0 at 1.5 gigabits per second, 2.0
But I'm
at
saying they both they both apply to SATA and eSATA.
yes.
1.5 could be 130. One point T. Sure, let's do an iPhone 15. Fuck. Three could be 3. Just don't want the. Alright, cool. And then what are the gigabytes for 1.5, 3, and 6? Oh, that's where I got 1.5, 3, and 6 from. Mm, 150, 300, and 600. Wait, why did I get 1.5, 3, and 6 though? The revisions are called SATA 1.5, revision SATA 1.5, and SATA 3.0, or it's called SATA 1, 2, and 3. Oh, gigabits. What, 150 and 300 megabytes or something, or what? Oh, okay, 1.5, 3, and 6 gigabits. But storage we refer to as bytes, not bits, right? Oh, transfer is measured in bits, storage is bytes. Okay, so 1.5, 3, and 6 is gonna be SATA 1 through 3. Okay, cool. And that applies to SATA and eSATA, right? Okay. I guess I could keep YouTube open here. Someone were to like comment or something. Does the chat ever get? Oh. Does YouTube chat ever delete or no? Like if I just kept chatting here, would I see the chat? Would it not delete and I'd see it at the end of the stream? Someone commented. Do they disappear? Like even if I held a YouTube video for the whole, like let's say I held it for 6 hours, I could just scroll up and see all the chats at the beginning of the stream.
One is a 7-pin SATA data connector that has an L shape to it, and the other is going to be a 15-pin SATA power cable that has another L-shaped connector on it, but it's going in the opposite direction. If you use SATA version 1, it's going to have a maximum theoretical speed of 1.5 gigabits per second, which gives you about 150 megabytes per second of throughput. If you use SATA version 2, this is a maximum speed of 3 gigabits per second, which is roughly around 300 megabytes per second of throughput. If you're using SATA version 3, this is the most modern and fastest version of SATA, and it'll be rated at around 6 gigabits per second or around 600 megabytes per second of throughput. Now, when you're working on a legacy system, you may not come across SATA, and instead, you'll find something known as an IDE or PATA interface. For these devices, you'll be using a 40-wire data cable, which is a flat ribbon type cable.
PATA is a type of storage cable. Is PATA a type of storage cable? PATA, PATA. Jesus Christ. Okay. Oh my god. What does ATA stand for?
ATA stands for Advanced Technology Attachment. It's the interface standard used to connect storage devices like hard drives to a computer's system bus.
Sorry, say it again.
ATA means Advanced Technology Attachment, the standard interface for connecting.
Gotcha. Parallel ATA. Oh, SATA's called SATA. Oh, so it's a form of SATA? So ATA has PETA, and then after PETA is SATA? That's interesting.
Cable that's able to connect to the motherboard to that drive. And then you use a 4-pin Molex connector that will power the drive, or if you're using a combined IDE or PATA cable that is an 80-wire cable, it will combine your data and power into a single cable if your motherboard supports that. As I said,
So I know there's a 15-pin data power cable for SATA drives, and there's also Molex connectors were used for power drives too, or were they used for everything, or so of the power connectors, was there multiple power connectors for hard drives? Is there other ones besides those two? Like today I'm talking about? No, I'm talking about today. Okay. Interesting. I didn't know that.
this is more of a legacy item, so you're likely not going to see this in most modern computers. But if you're working in a corporate or
IDE is another name for another word to describe PETA, or
enterprise environment, and they have some older systems lying around like critical servers or SCADA workstations, you may come across this type of IDE or PATA interface. The third type of interface you may come across when working with a hard drive is what's called a SCSI interface, or SCSI, which stands as the small computer systems interface. Now, when you're using a SCSI cable, this can either support 7 or 15 devices in a daisy chain configuration, depending on if you're using a narrow SCSI or a wide SCSI. And each device will require a device ID that's being set on it so that each.
These are just more connectors. That's for data. For data.
Cable knows which device is going to be numbered between.
SCSI cables can support 7 or 15. Yeah. The 50, it's going to be like a 50 pin connector is going to be 7 and 68 pin is going to be 15, right? 68, 15.
Between 1 and 7 or 1 and 15 as appropriate. To configure your device to know what number it's going to be assigned, you're going to set this using a jumper block or selector switches on the back of the device. In most modern systems, SCSI is considered to be a slow-speed interface because narrow SCSI can only operate at 40 megabits per second, and wide SCSI can only operate at 320 megabits per second.
Wide 320 megabits per second. Narrow is 40 megabits per second.
Therefore, SATA is much more popular these days because of its higher speeds, and so you're going to find SATA
Yeah, holy
used in
shit.
a lot more
Gigabits versus megabits? Jesus.
systems than SCSI. Now, there is one new type of SCSI, though, that you may find in a modern system, and this is known as SAS, or Serial Attached SCSI. Now, Serial Attached SCSI is a point-to-point serial protocol that's used to move data to and from a hard disk in some server or high-end workstation environments. Serial Attached SCSI comes in 4 different varieties: SAS1, SAS2, SAS3, and SAS4. SAS1 operates at speeds of up to 3 gigabits per second in full duplex mode. SAS2 operates at speeds of up to 6 gigabits per second in full duplex mode. SAS3 operates at speeds of up to 12 gigabits per second in full duplex mode, and SAS4 operates at speeds of up to 22.5 gigabits per second in full duplex mode. Serial attached SCSI devices are considered to be hot pluggable like a SATA devices. Serial attached SCSI devices also support backwards compatibility with version 2 or version 3 of SATA, and this allows you to attach bits per second in full duplex mode, and SAS4 operates at speeds of up to 22.5 gigabits per second in full duplex mode. Serial attached SCSI devices are considered to be hot pluggable like a SATA devices. Serial attached SCSI devices 22.5 gigabits per second in full duplex mode. Serial attached SCSI devices are considered to be hot pluggable like a SATA devices. Serial attached SCSI devices also support backwards compatibility with version 2 or version 3 of SATA, and this allows you to attach a SATA drive to a serial attached SCSI backplane if you desire. So remember, hard disk drives are still alive and well in most modern computers, but they're usually going to rely on SATA cables instead of IDE, PATA, or SCSI. Whenever you're trying to decide whether or not to use a solid-state device or a hard disk drive, it really is going to come down to 3 main factors: cost,
Cost, performance, capacity. So hard drives are good for capacity. And yeah, so capacity, and bad performance. I like those words better. STDs are going to be good for. They're going to be good for. STDs are going to be good for are going to be the reverse. Capacity is going to be Dookie, I feel like. And performance is going to be muy bueno, I feel like.
Cost, performance, and capacity. This is because hard disk drives will cost a lot less than solid state devices, but they also have less performance than a solid.
In general, they're just going to be cheaper. I guess. Cheaper. Expensive. Mm, okay. I guess we can just. Mm, there we go. That's good. So that's the pros, kind of the pros and cons. And then uh can we make it light purple actually? Is that better? Yeah, I think that's better actually. Light purple. The dark purple will distract me from my brain. Okay. These are just diagrams to help us understand what the fuck's going on. I think we don't need that one anymore, but maybe we do. Buffer is going to be an attribute of performance, so we can just name the attribute blue. The attributes are going to be blue, actually. Typically 8 to 256, and we don't need this cache anymore. We can put this underneath. We could do like RPM ranges, I guess, which can range from what is the RPMs range again for HDDs typically? Okay. I'll just say cache for my brain speed. It's going to be RPM. And then we can put these under attributes. Bold. Up. And I guess we could just make this purple as well. We could do capacity too, I guess. We could fit that in here. What are typical capacities for hard drives? Or how would you say that? Well, first, how would you say that? Capacity? Is that the word you would use normally for real? Okay. Tell me what is typical capacities again? Let me turn off my ESPN fantasy notifications. Um, all right. Cache, speed. I don't think I need to know tracks or this stuff for real. Maybe I will later, but right now I'm not worried about it. Um, um, pros and cons. Is there a way to? Yeah, I'll just say pros and cons. I'll just say price here. I think is good. Uh, performances. Green bean brother. Green bean brother. Okay. So then we can actually go boom, boom, boom. boom, boom. And we can go boom, boom. And maybe we can make this a little bit bigger. Cool. Kill bud. Actually, let me get one more. Bam! That's thick as fuck. Too thick maybe? Fuck me. Let's go down a little bit for these. Yeah, that's better. There we go. Much better for my eyeball. Go like that. And then go like. Stop with your stuff getting in my way, bro. Yeah, that's cool. We'll do that for now. We got our hard drive. Now let's do our SSD. So we wanna pros and cons we got already pretty much.
Solid state device. The biggest benefit of using a hard disk drive over a solid state device is the fact that they have these larger capacities for storage. And normally, this will give you 5, 10, or even 15 times as much storage on a hard disk drive for the same cost as an equivalent solid state device, making it a great choice for your mass storage needs when speed is not your primary consideration.
Um yeah, so price we can put at the top of the list. Uh and then we can put, or no, sorry, capacity was supposed to be at the top actually. Fuck. So capacity is kind of like the main pro. And then for this one, the main pro is obviously going to be performance. Cool. Nice. Is there a way where we can just get rid of, yeah, the thickness? There we go. Oh my god, that's so nice for my eyeballs. So nice. Nice. Okay. Oh, and this one should be light red. So now we go to the next.
In this lesson, we're going to cover solid state drives or solid state devices, which are more
I
commonly
gotta pee, baby. Gotta pee. Man, it's so satisfying whenever you get stuff like organized and understood. Ooh, okay.
called SSDs. Now, a solid state drive or solid state device is going to use flash memory technology to implement persistent mass storage instead of using rotating and spinning platters like we saw with traditional hard disk drives. Because of this, flash memory can give us a much better performance than those mechanical components. In this lesson, we're going to cover solid state drives or solid state devices, which are more commonly called SSDs. Now, a solid state drive or solid state device is going to use flash memory technology to implement persistent mass storage instead of using rotating and spinning platters like we saw with traditional hard disk drives. Because of this, flash memory can give us a much better performance than traditional hard.
Rotating and spinning can mean the same thing in everyday language, but in the context of hard disk drives, they both refer to the platters turning at high speed to read and write data. The course is likely using both terms to emphasize that these drives rely on physical movement to function. If you need a detailed explanation for
Oh my gosh, that's like so fucking annoying that he just did that. Like, why? Why? Just say rotating. You just like used unnecessary brain processing for flash memory
Disk drives. Because of this, flash memory can give us a much better performance than those mechanical components that were used inside of our hard disk drives, especially in terms of reading performance, because we can seek to any part of that SSD almost instantly. Whereas with a hard drive, we have to spin the platter around and then move the seek head to be able to find that part that we want to read from. Because of this lack of mechanical components, SSDs are much faster and much more durable than a traditional hard drive. For example, if I drop a traditional hard drive, I actually risk losing all of my data because that platter might get moved out of place, or the read write head could actually scratch the platter, and that would make me lose my data. But because SSDs don't have the mechanical
flash memory ability.
and moving pieces inside of them, if you drop them, you are less likely to damage them or lose your data that's stored on them. To be able to destroy an SSD by dropping it, you really have to drop it from like a 5-story building and really give it a lot of force in order to crack the memory chips or the circuit board inside of it, and that could lead to data loss. SSDs first commonly became used inside of tablets and smartphones because of their small form factor and the ability to have no moving parts, makes them very energy efficient. This allows you to have longer battery life for these portable devices. Over time, these started finding their ways into laptops, and more recently, you're seeing SSDs included in desktops and servers as well because of their high performance, even though they do have a higher cost than a traditional hard drive. When it comes to SSDs, there are three main form factors you're going to come across. These are called 2.5 inch, 1.8 inch, and an M2 form factor. Now, a 2.5-inch form factor is going to be the typical form factor that's used when you're replacing a traditional hard drive inside of a laptop or one of the smaller form factor desktops. 1.8-inch form factor used to be used widely inside of smaller laptops, but these days that's been replaced by the M2 form factor. The M2 form factor doesn't resemble a traditional hard drive at all, and instead it looks like a memory chip. It is very small, it is very sleek, and it is very light, and it makes it a great product to use when you're using laptops because of the fact that it has this very small package or small form factor. When it comes to connecting your SSD, there are multiple different ways you can do this depending on which SSD you're using. If you're using one of the older SSDs, these relied on SATA connectors. Now, this would plug in just like a regular SATA hard drive would, where you would use a 7-pin SATA data cable and plug it into the SSD, along with a 15-pin SATA power cable in order to make the connection for that drive.
Okay, so 5 inch, 1.8 inch.
Very light, and it makes it a great product to use when you're using laptops because of the fact that it has this very small package or small form factor. When it comes to connecting your SSD, there are multiple different ways you can do this depending on which SSD you're using. If you're using one of the older SSDs, these relied on SATA connectors. Now, this would plug in just like a regular SATA hard drive would, where you would use a 7-pin SATA data cable and plug it into the SSD, along with a 15-pin SATA power cable in order to make the connection for that drive. If you're using a 2.5-inch or 1.8-inch form factor with your SSD, they are typically going to rely on a SATA connection. Now, as an alternative to this, there was something developed called mSATA. Now, mSATA is a smaller form factor that allows an SSD to be packaged as an adapter card that can be plugged into a combined data and power port on your motherboard.
That's the HD. Hold on. So all HD. And it's gonna be Theta also. It's doing a lot of things. All right, so HDD theta. They also use not regular. And SD. So SDD. No, 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 no. The different factor of 5 and 1 special port. And wait, M SATA is oh, so it's not okay. I need to the SD itself. So hard drives use a PATA, yes, and SD. That's the connections, the actual drives themselves. Now the M2 itself, right? Okay, and what's the connect? What does it? Not say dot slide. How do I look up dot two slot but M dot M2. I'm just trying to look up.
Hey guys, Compulsion84 here. Today I'm going to show you how to install an M2 drive. Cool. So these M2 drives are very small, safety precautions with the brace. So you're going to want to check your motherboard in. For me, I had to wiggle it, gently setting aside the small screw, and then you'll be ready to install the M2 drive. So you want to insert the drive at a 30-degree angle and gently slide it in. For me, I had to wiggle it ever so slightly just to get it past the friction of the connector, and then it will be sitting. So you want to insert the drive at a 30-degree angle and gently slide it in. For me, I had to wiggle it ever so slightly just to get it past the friction. So once you've picked your slot, remove the screw with a Phillips head screwdriver, gently setting aside the small screw, and then you'll be ready to install the M2 drive. So you want to insert the drive at a 30-degree angle and gently slide it in. For me, I had to wiggle it ever so slightly just to get it past the friction of the connector, and then it will be sitting, hanging off the motherboard a little bit. And then I'll show you how to remove it. You just, same thing, pull it out gently.
Hey guys, welcome back to ShellTip. There's one thing, I do have an SSD drive already in there, but since I started YouTube, I need more space. Last time I opened this computer, card doesn't come with two screws, which is needed. So you flip it over, so the chips are on top, put it in, screw it down, these tiny screws, make sure it's here, SSD slot. Alright, installation of the MSATA SSD card. Right into the slot here, SSD slot. Card doesn't come with two screws, which is needed. So you flip it over. So the chips are on top. Put it in. Screw it down. These tiny screws. Make sure it's set right. Tiny, tiny, tiny screws. So be careful you don't drop them. There it is. Tap down, set it up into the motherboard. Ready to go. Now assemble the computer back. All I had to do.
Okay, so the M and the SS either use M2 slot or what fits. So that's I've so the SSD for the
This actually would operate at the same speed as a regular SATA connection. So if you're using a SATA version 3 connection, this would be a 6 gigabit per second connection, which translates roughly to about 600 megabytes per second of throughput. Now, this can become a bottleneck for you though, because SSDs are really fast and they can operate faster than SATA speeds. Because of this, manufacturers created something known as NVMe, which stands for the Non Volatile Memory Express. This will be used with M2 form factor SATA devices and allows you to plug directly into the motherboard using this NVMe port. Oftentimes on your motherboard, this will be labeled as M2, although M2 is technically the form factor of the SSD and not the connector type because the
the
connector type
M.2
is
slot is also
NVMe. Now, in addition to SATA, mSATA, and NVMe, there's another one called PCIe, which stands for PCI Express or Peripheral Component Interconnect Express.
stress. But the M.2 slot can be that's there's two different types of data and then M.2 Uh, okay, cool. So we have M.2 slot, and we have the M SATA slot just works slot. Types of oh, okay, so there's M SATA slots. Are these called slots or what? There's two types of slots. There's M.2 slot can the SATA protocol or can uh but the slot itself is the protocol is something that happens. So there's types of data M.2s. Okay. Okay. Uh buddy bro. but the slot itself needs. And not only does the SD drive need.
That's right, those same port. Oftentimes on your motherboard, this will be labeled as M2. Although M2 is technically the form factor of the SSD and not the connector type, because the connector type is NVMe. Now, in addition to SATA, MSATA, and NVMe, there's another one called PCIe, which stands for PCIe, which stands for the Non-Volatile Memory Express. This would plug in just like a regular SATA hard drive would, where you would use a 7-pin SATA data cable and plug it into the SSD, along with a 15-pin SATA power cable in order to make the connection for that drive. If you're using a 2.5-inch or 1.8-inch form factor with your SSD, they are typically going to rely on a SATA connection. Now, as an alternative to this, there was something developed called mSATA. Now, mSATA is a smaller form factor that allows an SSD to be packaged as an adapter card that can be plugged into a combined data and power port on your motherboard. This actually would operate at the same speed as a regular SATA connection, so if you're using a SATA version 3 connection, this would be a 6 gigabit per second connection, which translates roughly to about 600 megabytes per second of throughput. Now, this can become a bottleneck for you, though, because SSDs are really fast and they can operate faster than SATA speeds. Because of this, manufacturers created something known as NVMe, which stands for the Non Volatile Memory Express. This will be used with M2 form factor SATA devices and allows you to plug directly into the motherboard using this NVMe port. Oftentimes on your motherboard, this will be labeled as M2. Although M2 is technically the form factor of the SSD and not the connector type, because the connector type is NVMe. Now,
It's SSD.
in addition to SATA, mSATA, and NVMe, there's another one called PCIe, which stands for PCI Express or Peripheral Component Interconnect Express. That's right, those same PCI Express slots on your motherboard, whether they're X1 or X16, can also hold an SSD if you buy an SSD that is form factored for those slots and can use those.
If you want to upgrade your old system with a blazing fast NVMe drive, you might need some kind of adapter to make that happen. NVMe SATA adapters exist, but these are limited to SATA bus speeds, which on my Phantom 2 machine means around 600 megabytes a second. Now, M.2 slots use 4 PCI Express lanes, which means you could basically just plug an M.2 NVMe drive into a PCI Express slot. You just need an adapter. Today, I will be testing three of the cheapest models I could find. Do they work at all? Will you get any decent speeds with them? Let's find out. To get some kind of baseline, I first ran a speed test on a SATA SSD already in this system, which is a cheap ADATA SU630 drive. In my very unscientific test, this one averages around 560 megabytes a second read rate and 480 megabytes a second write rate. Not bad at all, given the maximum throughput of the SATA connection. Let's go on with the NVMe drive. I got this 500 gigabytes crucial NVMe drive, which according to the packaging should be able to reach a whopping 4700 megabytes a second read rate. If you can get anywhere close, I'd be very happy. The system I'm using only has PC.
So the plug-in SD like why do you keep saying that? Question